Alright, so for fun, because I'm doing end cloth stuff, I know a few people are doing, like clothesline things. I figured I would do a quick bit and just see what happens if I try to set up a little end cloth clothesline, just for funs. Alright, so, I have here going to be like my clothesline poles, and then I need a string. So there's a few different ways to do a string. Honestly, dynamic curves are probably the most logical way to do this. I'm gonna just see what happens if I use. Ooh, no. I'm just gonna. Set up my cylinder, stupid. I'm just gonna see what happens if I use end cloth, because I know it can be done with end cloth. But like I said, dynamic curves are probably a also good thing to look into instead of using end cloth for this. But end cloth also works. So let's do the things. All right, so we have our string, which is just like ridiculously thick. And since this is, I really only want this little thing to be floppy, I'm going to make it relatively low poly, but with lots of subdivisions on the, where am I going for this? Lots of subdivisions vertically. So we'll start with this, I guess. So I'm going to go ahead and make this maybe a little bit skinnier. So like I said, I'm just going to try to do all this with end cloth. I'm going to go ahead and do create end cloth. I'm going to save this also really quick. End cloth. Hello, slime. Give it a minute. I'll probably come back with text in like 30 seconds. So I'm also just going to run through like how to set all this up, including making some like really crappy looking socks or whatever for this, just for fun. So, come on, there we go. The lag is real. Okay, I thought I made this skinnier. Whatever. All right, so we have this cloth. Obviously not doing anything very good right now. Nope. I'm gonna also set this to be 100. Great. All right, so what I'm gonna do is the same thing I did for the top of the curtains, where I'm just gonna go ahead and grab each end of these, grab the vertices, do end constraint, and transform. And what that should do is basically give me a weird little draped cloth. So I'm not gonna sit here and be like, this is totally the best looking thing ever, but you know, it's a little clothesline. It'll blow in the breeze if you have a breeze. You can also go in and mess with the, again, stretch and compression resistance to get different effects if you want like a tauter clothesline, that kind of thing. You can also, now you can play with rigidity a little bit, which is like, I don't know, I always find it like hard to mess with, but it basically will, it's less like a drapey cloth and more like a stiff sort of like wire or something like that. It's kind of how I think about it. It does tend to make a weird bouncy effect when you're first starting out, but anywho. I'm going to go back and just sort of set this to 0 because I think it'll be, I'll set it to like 0.02 or something random. Alright, so now for some really trashy looking clothes that I'm about to make for this. It's gonna be terrible, I promise you. Alright, so I'm just gonna I'll start with a shirt. I feel like that's probably all you really need. Same, you know, principles apply to everything else. So I'm gonna go ahead and just add some subdivs to this. And then I'm gonna do something really janky where I just sort of like cut out a very bad looking neck hole for this. And I'm going to go ahead and just delete these vertices so it gives you something that's kind of more actual neck shaped. And then again, I'm just going to be real sketchy about this and be like, yes, let's extrude some sleeves. It's going to be glorious. So there's a few things you can do to make this look better, none of which I'm going to do right now, but they involve basically laying out your geometry kind of in a way like where a shirt would actually be naturally cut. So if you have like a seam in a shirt going like this, you can kind of like set up your geometry like that so that it'll, you know, hold your seams and all that nonsense. So we have our really god-awful looking shirt. I'm going to go ahead and just extrude this a tiny bit. I'll do forward and then what you actually want to do, and this is not a thing that I normally recommend, but you can fix this after the fact. I'm actually going to go through and just like anywhere there should be a hole in this shirt, I'm going to punch a hole in it. So for right now you are working with flat geometry, which should totally be fixed later, but that's really just do your sim and then kind of like extrude it, is usually what I do. So we have our exceedingly ugly little, little shirt here. What I'm going to try to do is do a component to component, and I always have issues setting this one up, but a component to component constraint. So the first thing we need is to actually make the shirt end cloth. And just to give you an idea of how this behaves, you can see that it's kind of, you know, it'll sort of eventually, if you let it run long enough, cool, my cloth has run away, it'll sort of deform, you know, and start looking a little bit like a better shirt. If I had more geometry, that would look even better. But what I'm going to do is, again, just pop up here really quick. I'll move this down a little bit so it doesn't look like it's, you know, it was pretty overtly clipping before. You can see it kind of like got stuck in the whole thing. But what I should be good to do now, so what I did previously is I was like, all right, like let me just set up a transform constraint. So imagine that this is like pinned here. What you don't want in this case is just a regular transform, because then your shirt is just sort of like hanging in the air randomly, and then like your cloth thing is hitting it. It looks really stupid. So I'm just going to go ahead and undo that. So what I'm going to try to set up is a component-to-component constraint. Apparently there are no useful information about the settings in here. So I'm just going to go ahead and create the constraint and just kind of see what happens. And actually in this case, this is exactly what I wanted, which is very exciting. Alright, so we have this janky, real janky looking little constraint, but at least our shirt is in fact hanging on this pole, and you can see that now we get a little bit of nice tension in here from sort of where the shirt is dangling. So just for grins, I'm going to go through and do the same thing on the other side. So I'm just going to grab some random vertices on this shirt. Okay, I'm actually going to grab some that are at least closer to some other edge loops. And I'm actually just going to grab all of these and just hit G to repeat that command. And again, now we should... what have I done? That is objectively not what I wanted. Alright, so I'm going to do end constraint again, component to component. Aha, okay. Oh. Apparently I didn't have any vertices on the shirt connected when I did that, so, you know, cool. And G again. Yay! Alright, so now again, we have a shirt on a clothesline. It looks kind of silly. I will show you one more random thing that you can do, and that is basically going to be adding clothespins to this. So let me just make, and to be fair, I actually have not tried this. I don't know if it's going to work super beautifully, but let's try. Where am I going? Sorry. I forgot how to model things all of a sudden. Cool. What? How is this a P-sphere? What is going on? I think my clipping planes have gone insane. Alright, so I'm just gonna go ahead and vert snap that up here. And these are not gonna be particularly nice looking clothespins. They're just gonna be, you know, random, really random trashy looking clothespins. Cool. Here's my clothespin. Like I said, very unpretty, but gets the job done. So what I'm going to do is just, oof, that's so bad. I'm going to just sort of duplicate this over to the other sleeve and use this to sort of camouflage the weird area where I've like pinned this to the clothesline. I'm going to go ahead and also believe you should be able to do the thing where you mesh combine these. Boop. Mesh combine, darn it. Okay, fine. I don't know why that is like not clicking correctly for me. Alright, so mesh combine them, delete history, go back to your FX menu, do endcloth, and then create endcloth. And there is totally other ways to do this that don't involve also making the clothespins endcloth. However, and it's getting a little weird because the endcloth is like clipping through itself. So in this case it's holding on where it kind of shouldn't hold on. But what you can do is increase the rigidity up to like a really high number, and those little clothespins basically won't deform. And in this case, they're sticking where they are because I've started them out clipping through the geometry, which is pretty much always bad practice. So theoretically what you would actually have is, you know, a shirt that wasn't clipping through the string, a string that actually had a properly modeled little pin around it. And then what you could do, if you wanted to, is go in and do the same thing that we did before, where you just grab the this little transform constraint thing. Or sorry, you'd grab the vertices in this and do a component-to-component transform, and then these should stick to the string and the shirt and also be really rigid, so they wouldn't really like change position at all. So we now have a really, really ugly simmed shirt. What you can do to make this a little bit more interesting is, one, have better models, obviously, but also, you can turn on wind speed. So if you turn this on now, it's like, oh look, an interesting shirt, like blowing in the breeze. then you can key that off, and then, you know, you can have like gusts of winds. I guess the these things are breaking down very aggressively. And you can add, you know, wind noise in there and just like do some other like weird stuff with that. What I would recommend if you're going to go with this route of doing things, especially if everything's sort of all end cloth, or even dynamic curves, is make sure that you drop your cloth before your animation starts. So if you are starting on frame 1 and you do this and you see that sim like starting to drop from like whatever position you had it in, that is very, very much not an ideal thing to see. So what I normally recommend doing is going in and say maybe go to frame like negative, like figure out how long it takes to drop, and then go to frame, you know, negative 200 or whatever, and just like let it sim out. And that way it'll just, you know, you don't need to see it doing its end cloth back end stuff when you're actually trying to do your animation. And now it seems like this might be a good time to go in, you know, mess a little bit with rigidity, maybe make that a little bit more rigid. Now that there's a bunch of heavy stuff hanging off of it, it might help to mess with some of those settings a little bit. Yeah, it's getting a little twisted and weird. I think if that were either a dynamic curve or, you know, a little bit thinner, it would be less awkward looking. In this case, I could try theoretically to add a little bit of pressure into this to see if that would help sort of expand the end cloth, but I think honestly most of the issues in this case are being caused by the fact that I have clipping end cloth through other end cloth. That usually, I'm actually surprised it didn't explode the sim entirely. But yeah, so I mean that's just like a really janky little version of doing clothes, and then you could add other stuff in here, like you know, if you had like a hand or something, or like a character running through this, just set that up to be where am I going? An end cloth passive collider, and that should affect your simulation as you go. And then of course, don't forget to cache stuff.